We had been waiting for Councillor Alexander to join us. Just think he's having a bit of technical difficulty, so he may join us as we go, but I think we'll just maybe make a start in the process. We don't have any formal apologies. No. Declarations of interest. Anyone have a declaration of interest? No. Okay, this morning's meeting is to consider Children's Services School and Early Years Establishments reopening plans, COVID-19 recovery. So I'll just ask Mr Naylor to maybe take us through the report, and then there'll be an opportunity for members for any questions or anything after that. Okay, Mr Naylor.
Thanks, Convener. Good morning. As you know, we had prepared a report to be considered on the 25th of June, but at or around that time, the national expectation changed in terms of schools returning, and there's now an expectation that schools will return in full in August. So the report that's in front of you is one which sets out a managed way in which we think that the schools can return safely, and that we can get all of the children back into a school environment over the course of the first 2 weeks of the school term before moving to what's been referred to as the 100% model. The report is essentially a technical one in terms of operational requirements and what we will have in place to facilitate that. And I think it'd be fair to say at this point that I would intend, probably after the recess and once schools are back, to bring members some further update on the curriculum that will need to be in place in terms of recovery as we move forward. When we go back, it's not just going to be about catching up with lost learning, but it's actually going to have to be quite a lot about restoring relationships for children, getting them back in touch with their peers, looking at any of the impacts that the long layoff has had in terms of social interaction, mental health and well-being and so on. So I'll bring a report later on those aspects. So essentially what the report is asking members to agree are proposals around what I'm referring to as a soft start. And the report goes through various sections, first of all setting out the national context and the changing nature both of national guidance and advice, but also of expectations. So paragraph 4.2, fairly high level description of the intention to support children and staff, and the argument here is essentially that if we went from children having been away for 4.5 months to everybody just descending on a school on day one, then I think there would be significant challenges, not just for the staff but also for the pupils as well. So we had an original plan which set out arrangements for the first 6 or 8 weeks. What we've done essentially is taken the arrangements that we were intending to put in place for the first 2 weeks, and we're asking members to agree that we proceed with that plan. And what that will mean is that all children by the end of that 2-week period have met their teachers, have met their peer group, are familiar with new setups and layouts in the school, and particularly for the children that are going into primary 1 and primary 7, that we've been able to undertake some of the elements of what would have been a normal transition scenario. The report goes through various sections in terms of what we intend to do around reopening of early years, reopening of primary schools and reopening of secondary schools. And I think within the early years section, if I refer you to paragraph 4.3, what we're intending to do is have essentially 3 phases. So first of all, there's the phase 1, which allows all private and partner nurseries to reopen if they wish to do so from the 15th of July. And then Paragraph 433 sets out our intentions for all Falkirk establishments for the first 2 weeks. And then importantly, given some of the local interest that there's been in terms of our position around 4.3 paragraph 4, 4.3 paragraph 4 outlines that it's our intention that from the 24th of August, all those settings that were already providing 1140 hours would revert to providing 1140 hours. And in those where that's not possible because we haven't been able to do the infrastructure works, that they would deliver initially 600 hours and then move to 736.5, and that would be achieved by changing the opening times. So we would be in a position where over 75% of our families were getting 1140 hours, with another tranche getting more than they were getting last session, and plans in place to bring the remainder on stream as quickly as possible. Paragraph 438 just gives a little bit of context in terms of the construction work and what needs to happen before we get to a full 1140. There are some works that are being done this summer that will increase our capacity, but there are a number of establishments that are detailed in the appendix where it will not be until we get works done next summer that we'll have full 1140 hours. Paragraph 4.4 sets out the plans for primary and details the pattern of attendance for the cohorts of children over the course of the first fortnight, and thereafter a return in full on the 24th of August. Similarly, paragraph 4.5 indicates what the intention is for secondary schools. 4.6 special education establishment plans are set out as well. In all of these settings, all of the children would be at school over the course of that first fortnight, as I said before, with their new teachers, their new support staff, getting to know their new peer groups, and learning about the changed setup that there will be in schools in terms of, I expect, some continuing restrictions around hand washing, moving around, and so on and so forth. As we had already managed to achieve in negotiation with our local authority partners in Stirling and Clackmannan, the fact that our schools are starting a week earlier meant that we needed to find another week for a holiday. So that's going to be added on to what was the existing October holiday. So that now becomes a 2-week holiday in line with what the Education, Children and Young People Executive agreed would be the case for session 2022. Paragraph 4.8 describes some of the additional staffing and how that's going to be achieved. And then paragraph 4.9 sets out some of the additional costs that we anticipate. Critically, the costs around transport have yet to be defined. We are working on the assumption that if the Scottish Government announcements on the 7th and then the 30th of July make it clear that there isn't going to be an expectation for social distancing of children in school, then it would follow that there wouldn't be an expectation for there to be social distancing on transport as well. But we await further guidance on that, and we also await further guidance on anything that may or may not emerge in terms of the use of face coverings, either for staff or for pupils. Towards the end of section 4.9, there's some indicative figures of our expected loss of income over the course of this period. But I think it would be fair to say, and in line with the report that the emergency exec saw and the financial position a couple of weeks ago, officers across the council are working to try and get as much clarity as they can on the cost implications of COVID. But I would say that it continues to be a work in progress. as I said, the appendix details the position in terms of various different early years establishments and when they will come online. But I think I'll stop there and see if there's any questions from members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr Naylor. Councillor McHugh, do you want to come in first?
Thanks, convener, and thank you, Mr Naylor. I'd like to say again thank you to Mr Naylor and his whole team, head teachers, managers and every member of his staff that's been involved in this unprecedented time. I want to highlight that the staff who have worked continuously through the ever-changing advice and nature of the COVID and the effect that it's had on us nationally. I really appreciate the fact that given the information that we were given just over a week ago and plans all had to be changed, then the staff obviously had to sit down again and plan things. Look to the recommendations, totally accept and believe that it's the right way to go with a soft start. I believe the children, having been out of formal teaching for so long, that the 2 weeks will be good for them and good for the staff to allow them to get back together again and to move forward. Also giving the teachers a chance and nursery staff the chance to see where our children are at, basically, to be able to move them on the best way forward. Appreciate that Mr Naylor has highlighted the mental health and well-being of our children. I think there'll be an awful lot of work needing done around that as the children come back into schools, and hope that the organisations that we have partnership with, as well as our own family support workers and various other members of staff, will be involved in that. I'd just like to move the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh. I think you're absolutely right. It's been hugely complex trying to design a system to get the children back to school, and in such a fluid and changing environment. It's made it even more complex, and there's been a tremendous amount of work carried out by the staff right across children's services, and being able to do that and beyond, because of the catering, etc., that all comes into the mix. So I think I would agree with you that around the soft start, that there's going to be the need to give that wee bit of space to allow people to get adjust to coming back into a more formal environment, and those that are transitioning being able to have that opportunity when there is less buzz around. I think it's the right thing to do, and obviously there's the re-socialisation around the new normal it's going to be within their schools. It's going to take a wee bit of time for everybody to get used to, and indeed to be tweaked, etc. Issues around transport, we have to wait on a wee bit more clarity around that. I think that there's nothing else that we can do other than wait to see what's happening there, and from that look to develop plans, and I'm sure that Mr Naylor, if there is changes, would ensure that all members were updated, particularly in relation to that. But I'm just going to open it up to any questions or comments at this stage from members. Okay, Councillor Bissett and then Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, Convener. I'd also like to echo Adana's comments and compliment Mr Naylor and his team for all the hard work that they've done. It's certainly been very short notice to try and pull this together, and he's turned around the report, or the team have turned around the report very quick. And I know there's been an awful lot of work going in the background with all the teachers pulling together. So I think every elected member would send out their compliments to everyone involved across the piece. I agree that we should have a soft start. I think that makes sense to get a transition back to school, and kids that are leaving primary school to high school, you know, they'll get that transition. It'll be a wee bit easier on them. So we're happy to agree the recommendations, and I would just like to ask Mr Naylor if he could maybe expand on the practicalities and the logistics, if there's anything you could mention. I know it's fluid and I know things are being designed along. I just wondered if you could perhaps touch on anything to do with the practicalities and logistics, and maybe a wee bit about transport, because where you needed 2 buses before, you might need 4. Thank you. And I reserve the right to come back in. Thank you.
Okay, Naylor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bissett. In terms of transport, as I said earlier, the working assumption is that if it is deemed nationally that all children can return to school, that would effectively mean that there was a move away from social distancing for children. I think the announcement last week that children under the age of 12 can play together freely now, albeit with some restrictions for those in the 12 to 16 bracket. The direction of travel would seem to be moving away or getting to a point perhaps later in July where there's an official position around social distancing for children. That being the case, and the conditions being right for 100% return to school, then it would seem to me to be logical that it would follow that there wouldn't be restrictions on transport for children. And what that would mean is that effectively our existing transport arrangements, certainly for the mainstream children going on coaches to our schools, could go back to normal. One of the logistical challenges at the moment is that we don't know that yet. So we're in a position where we're waiting to get that advice and guidance and clarity before we engage with contractors. Some of the other logistical challenges that we'll face, I think, as I've mentioned before in certain forums, will be around the arena of additional support needs transport. With the easing of restrictions on children being together for the mainstream, that will be hugely helpful. But I anticipate that for children with additional support needs who currently travel to school in taxis, sometimes with escorts, sometimes without, that there may continue to be some restrictions around physical distancing for children with certain medical conditions, and also there might be some restrictions that require PPE arrangements. So in terms of those arrangements, again, it's a case of waiting for clarity, but we've already started scoping where we might need to use minibuses instead of taxis. And I suppose the other thing that's important here is the availability of taxi drivers coming back into the workforce. But I think as confidence grows in the community more widely, then there seems to be a move for many things to return to normal. In terms of the other practical considerations, through the recruitment of additional staff, and in particular, the recruitment of all the newly qualified teachers that didn't yet have a job, we've recruited them. That will boost our numbers by the high 30s in terms of teachers. Currently, we're anticipating that because of existing conditions in terms of people with underlying health conditions and other care factors, we anticipate that approximately 10% of our school staff might not be available at the beginning of the term. That's not a known yet. It will be known on the 10th of August effectively. But through the additional recruitment, we're pretty confident that the arrangements on the ground will work for the first fortnight. But there will be a fair degree of stock taking and further planning that needs to be done over the course of that first fortnight in terms of any issues that we need to address, staff that we need to move, in terms of the 100% restart. So I think in terms of keeping members up to date, I think it's probably going to be appropriate for there to be another report that comes perhaps around the time that schools go back to give you a position statement of where we are and any remaining issues that have still to be resolved.
Thank you, Mr. Naylor.
Apologies, Councillor Coombs.
Thanks, convener. Again, obviously, we all appreciate the work that's been done by officers and staff, but there is more to do. And I think the main one that I see from this report is around communication. As Robert alluded to, there has been a lot of, obviously, parents very concerned when the 1140s was taken off the table. And, you know, I'm sure they, as I am, delighted that the Scottish Government did its U-turn. It has led to a lot of confusion. And I think parents still need clarity. It's only 4 weeks now until the children do their phased return back into school and nurseries. And it's really just one of the questions is the website, the council website, although I get where Robert's coming from, and you have to get clarity from national government before local government can feed that out to parents. I think we need to be a lot more precise and clear about what we're telling parents. Now, I'm not sure if that's because we're waiting for this meeting to take place to approve the report that you've given here, which does seem to give a lot more clarity. But when I look at what's on the website and what parents are seeing and the questions that they're coming to me with, there is still a bit of a disconnect. And obviously parents have got work commitments, and, you know, for the good of the locality and the nation, they need to get back to work, and they need to have these conversations with their employers about what they can and can't do. And until there is this clarity from all levels of government, they're kind of left in limbo, and that concerns me somewhat.
Okay, Mr. Naylor.
So it's our intention that following this meeting today, if the report in front of you is agreed, then that gives us considerably more clarity that we can share with parents. And the intention is that we would have a letter that would go to parents that would cover off the arrangements for early years, the arrangements for primary, secondary, additional support needs, and that would then form the basis of an update on the website. As you'll know, we have the means to use something called group calls, so that every parent gets a text. That text can have a link, so that they all get a letter from Children's Services simultaneously that gives them the latest in terms of the updated position and the arrangements, crucially, for what will be day one. That will also allow individual schools to be confirming with parents, if you take primary as an example, whether their child is to be there on the first day back or the second day back, and similarly the secondary year groups, to be absolutely clear with parents. I think whilst the argument has been made for a soft start for the benefit of the children fundamentally, it does still mean that there's a 2-week period where that desire for everybody to get back to work full time is still problematic. But when you get to the 24th of August, then we revert to whatever families' childcare arrangements were previously. The other thing that I think is maybe important to mention is that we're already in discussion with some of the organisations that provide childcare, out of school care and so on. And once schools are back and we get to the 100% operating model, then the spaces in schools that are currently used for either preschool or after school care can come back online for those providers that provide that. So I agree with Councillor Coombs. I mean, this is I suppose a complicated jigsaw, but the direction of travel is very much that when we get towards the 24th of August, which after all is only 1 week after we would have started, then if schools are fully back, then a lot of the childcare concerns go away.
Okay, thanks for that, Robert. You're right. I'm glad to hear that you're talking about getting in touch with parents individually, because as you've said, 75% of nurseries, it's back down to that level of detail. What parents want to know is it's not that big picture that we need to look at. It's how does it affect me, and when can I go back to work, and all of these kind of questions. So just one final question. You're saying about texting or sending letters out to parents. When will that happen? When will that level of detail be available to say your child will start on this date?
We've started drafting that, and have a meeting with colleagues that I've arranged for tomorrow lunchtime for final sign-off. So I would expect probably no later than Wednesday evening, Thursday morning, we'll have that on the website, and we'll be issuing that letter coincident with it going up on the website. So within the next 48 hours.
Okay, that's fabulous. Thanks very much. Thanks, convener.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Reid. Pat, you wanted to come in? You're on mute.
No, my mistake. I hadn't intended. I will come in later, but there are people
Okay,
before me.
okay, right. Apologies. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, convener. I really feel for Mr. Naylor and his team and the great work that they've done. Obviously, they had plans in place before the announcement came. As already stated by previous speakers, there doesn't seem to be much clarity coming from the Scottish Government, and it doesn't give Mr. Naylor much time, and Mr. Naylor and his team much time to address the issues. We all know that there's no more important issues for parents than the education and health and safety of their children. And these are really anxious matters for parents to deal with. What is already stated by Councillor McHugh is what is important is the education and health of our school children. I've spoken to a few of the head teachers and deputy head teachers regarding the startup that's in place, and they're in the same mind as myself that it's the right stages to do it. We know that it's difficult times, but to put everybody in the first day would be complete madness. As we've got some of the high schools between 400 and 500 children going to a building for the very first time, not knowing the locality, not knowing where to go. So I think that we've done the right approach, and we, as our group, will be supporting the proposals. Just one question for Mr. Naylor. Is the private sector regarding early learning, are they prepared and ready for the restart?
Mr. Naylor.
That varies. One of my colleagues has got a meeting with the private providers, I think today, it might be tomorrow, about their readiness and their position. Some of them furloughed their staff at the start. So whilst some are very keen to get up and mobilised quickly, others have been, I think, less keen. And like everybody, awaiting various guidance to emerge, particularly around the health and safety and the social distancing rules and so on and so forth. But you know, perhaps what I should have mentioned is that we continue to have arrangements in place over the summer for critical childcare within Falkirk Council resources, and we certainly hope that as private and voluntary early years providers come on stream from potentially next week, that the capacity for people to be accessing that provision will grow. So I can't give you a definitive picture of the position of the 12 or so providers that we work with, but I would anticipate that probably at least half of them will be aiming to get started as soon as possible.
Just a final, if you didn't mind, convener. Leading on for Councillor Coombs's comments regarding communication, this is key for the people, the parents, Falkirk, and good communication will set them at ease because they're fearful for their child's future, and they won't be able to work themselves unless all this is resolved. So communication is key. Thank you, convener.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Nimmo?
Thanks, convener. Can I also thank the director and his staff for all the hard work and dedication that they've all shown during the pandemic. They've been carrying out a lot of work, sometimes at very tight timescales, and that's to be appreciated. So, Robert, if you could pass our thanks back to your staff, that would be appreciated. The Labour Group welcome this report and its recommendations. It actually reflects an amendment that we were going to put forward last week at the last meeting. It's just a shame that John Swinney didn't see the need to consult with anyone prior to his announcement last week. It's not that long ago he was promoting a blended learning approach. He seems to change his mind like the weather without the science actually changing to support it. But never mind, we are where we are. As far as the soft return approach is concerned, it's a common sense approach. We'll support that as well. You have to bear in mind that by the time the schools go back full time, the kids will have been off for the best part of 6 months. And it makes sense to have the lead-in period so that they can get acquainted with everything with the school and any changes that have been implemented. As far as the 1140 hours is concerned, that's something that we've supported as well, and we're glad to see that it's back on the cards and it's going to be reinstated. It'll benefit the young kids greatly, and also the parents indirectly, because it'll help them get back to work in a lot of cases as well. Just got one question for Robert. As far as the water testing is concerned in the schools, can we get an update in relation to that and what that is likely to cost us? Thanks, convener.
Yeah, the position at the moment is that plans are in place for the treatment of schools' water systems where that is required. All of the testing is complete. We have the first rounds of results. There's been clean and disinfect and flushing going on, and then retesting taking place. So at the moment we're at the stage of waiting for the second tests to come back, but we've got a timeline for all of our schools, and the working assumption is that we'll get the all clear for all of the school buildings and indeed all of the early years centres prior to the 30th of July, which is the date when the Scottish Government, we anticipate, will make the final decision on the 100% return position. That will mean that from the 30th up until the 6th of August, our school staff will be able to access the buildings to do any remaining setups that's required for the first day back, which is the 10th. All staff will be in school on the 10th and the 11th, which are the in-service days, with the pupils returning on the 12th. In terms of the cost of the water issue, I'm not really in a position to give you any indicative figure at the moment. There's a cost associated with, first of all, the testing. There's also then a cost associated with any treatment and or further remedial works that are required in individual schools. And we also anticipate that there may well be an increased bill from Scottish Water. So that information is being gathered, but it will be reported to members at a future date once final costs are known. I think it's also important that it's not just schools that are being tested. So, for example, municipal buildings and other buildings are being tested and treated as required as well, because as you'll know, there are certain buildings that the council will want to reopen as they can, though not all, in terms of the agenda that we have for mobile and remote working and people working from home, and linked to the work of the SPR. Very careful consideration is being given to the reopening of other council buildings, but the same process has been going through in terms of the testing for water and getting the all clear, so that if the council wants to open a particular building, they know that it's safe to do so.
Thanks, Rob. Convener, just another quick question, if I can. If there was a further outbreak of COVID-19, what lessons have we learned so far with this outbreak, and is there anything we would do different with hindsight?
I think that's a challenging one, Mr. Naylor.
Is there anything we would do different? Well, yeah, there's probably a number of things that we would do differently. I mean, I think, as members have acknowledged, there was a lot of work done very, very quickly in the early stages. The first bit of that was to set up our provision for critical childcare. I think we've got some lessons that we've learned from the way that we did that. It perhaps could have been done more quickly. I think we've learned quite a lot about the systems and processes that talk to each other within the councils and the ones that didn't talk to each other within the councils, in terms of data sets being matched and so on. So, for example, I and colleagues had a particularly difficult weekend 3 or 4 weeks ago, when we had to take the decision to close some of the childcare hubs over the issue of the water, and that then meant that we ended up with almost a sort of old-fashioned hand-gathering information to be able to contact all the parents that had been attending different hubs, because children were going to a cluster hub, so it wasn't a simple case of knowing that we could use the CMIS system that relate to individual schools. So when you've got children from 7 schools, you need to do a lot of cross-checking, cross-matching. So there's things like that. I think more generally, the country might reflect on when it locked down. It might in retrospect think we should have done that sooner. I think the other thing that would be something that I would want all parties to reflect on is the issue of communication that's been mentioned earlier. With so much guidance being developed, either from public health or from the Scottish Government or from other arenas, it's been coming thick and fast. Lots of people trying to do the right thing quickly. There's been another significant exercise in terms of knowledge, awareness, expectation around PPE, for example. There's a lot of people who have done things for very good reasons very quickly. Sometimes that's led to later challenges. So, for example, we got an offer in the very early stages from schools to say that they could be printing 3D masks. So we supported that and we got that off the ground. We then had to stop for a little bit and check with the relevant people that we were making the right things, and it wasn't that we were making the wrong things, but we had to check that we were giving them to the right people. So that there's lots of little learning points, but just to go back to the essence of your question, if there was a further outbreak, then I think we now have the knowledge, the systems and the processes in place to know how we would deal with that, and be able to continue in a safe way. I think our expectation at the moment is that at worst, we might expect when schools are open to have 1 or 2 isolated cases, as has happened elsewhere. So we might have a case where a teacher or a member of staff develops symptoms. That might also be the case for a child or children. But we now know what it is that we would do in those circumstances, and not move to sort of blanket closures as was done in the early stages this time.
Thanks, Robert.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Colley.
Yes, I actually just want. I mean, I think Alan raises some bigger questions across the piece. I mean, I think in terms of COVID-19, there's a great deal everybody has to learn, and I think. But I think the thing I want to say is, in terms of our staff, how fantastically well they responded, and I think. To Robert and his team, how fantastically well they've responded to a changing situation and a changing picture, and I think we should acknowledge that there's a great deal of progress at the moment across the piece, not just in education, and that's down to a lot of it is down to the fact that as a community, as a nation, that we have managed to reach a point where we're suppressing the virus, and long may that continue. I think yes, the point about a second spike or a second wave, and having the plans in place to be able to respond to that, I think are obviously very important. And I have a great deal of sympathy for Robert in relation to the guidance that was coming out thick and fast. I think all of us have had to try and wade our way through each of the different parts of it that is relevant to our activity. So I feel your pain a bit. I've been trying to translate some of that. So thank you. I just wanted to say that I think in relation to the soft start, and I think this is a really sensible way forward. I mean, I don't know if how many of us remember our first day going from primary school into high school. And I don't know about anybody else, but I went to a very small village school, and the translation into a massive high school was a huge issue. But for children who've been out of school for a considerable period of time, this is going to be an even more significant step. So I think it's a really sensible approach, and it's fantastic to see that everybody is supporting that, and I'm sure parents will be supportive of that as well. And it gives an opportunity for the staff to be able to identify any issues with those early groups, with P1s and S1s in their transition into their either primary or secondary. So I think I just want to say congratulations to the team for getting this together. I know it's a big job and it's a changing arena, but you stepped up admirably to do that, so thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Colley. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Convener. I see there's been a slight bit of criticism here towards the Scottish Government, and I, with the vast majority of the country, would say that we're happy to be being led through this pandemic by the Scottish Government and indeed the First Minister, rather than from down south in Westminster. I would like to also, and I'm going to be quick with this, is thank Robert and Pat actually for coming up with the idea of putting questions towards Robert beforehand. He's answered all them fully. I think I even came up with one that he was quite surprised at and had to go off and get the answer, but he did come back with that pretty sharpish. I have one question for you, Robert, and it's around the recruitment. Are we doing okay with the recruitment? Are we in a decent place going forward, and are we expecting to fill all the positions we've got?
Yes, we are. We were continuing with recruitment processes for the return of schools in any event in terms of our normal recruitment that takes place every summer. So every summer we have people that retire, people that move to other authorities and so on. So we've got a pattern of recruiting our probationers over the course of every summer, so that was already in hand. We also were progressing the recruitment of additional early years staff that it was previously anticipated would be needed for August, and I don't have the exact figures to date, but those that we were making offers to through the course of last week in terms of the additional newly qualified teachers, I think we were making something like 42 offers, and I think somewhere north of 30 have already agreed to come to us. So the general pattern is that that's going well. We've also been able to progress quite a lot of that recruitment using video conferencing interview techniques, which has been another learning area for staff across the piece and indeed for the candidates. But we've, I suppose, demonstrated that it can be done. But we're certainly hoping that when we get to August and we're in a position where we're going to be recruiting head teachers, that can be done in a more traditional manner, given the importance of those appointments. But overall, I would say that we're comfortable with where we are with recruitment.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you, Convener. And I do think the report makes a lot of sense. It also anticipates the situation that on the 30th of July there could well be a spike, in which case we go to Plan B or Plan A as it was. So it's a very sensible recommendation, I think. First question is, have we ever considered testing teachers and ancillary staff?
A short answer is no. I think that's something that would be recommended either by colleagues in public health or by Scottish Government. I know that some trade unions, not so much in Scotland, but I think down south have suggested that ought to be the case. But my knowledge of testing and testing processes and procedures are at a fairly high level in terms of what's been rolled out. But I don't anticipate that there would be blanket testing of school staff unless the position changed.
As you pointed out, the danger is an asymptomatic teacher or staff member.
Right. So what would happen in that situation is that every school has identified an area. So anybody who becomes symptomatic would immediately be moved to that area. If it was a child, parents contacted, so the child is supervised there with the appropriate social distancing and or the donning of any PPE that was deemed to be required. The parent then comes and collects the child, and the parents are given advice about NHS 24 and the quarantining arrangements that relate to the child and to the other family members. Similarly, if it was a member of staff, they would go to an area until such time as it could be determined that they could simply go home, or arrangements could be made for them to go home. So the guidance on all of that is pretty clear. So as I say, all schools have got a plan for where is that space, and how would it be managed as cases do or don't arise.
A further question is about NAT 5. S3, of course, have lost 3 months education. We're going to S4, and they might lose time there, of course, due to the confusion that exists. Is there a proposal to scrap N5 exams next year and have it all based on continuous assessment?
That is something that is subject of ongoing discussion at the National Education Recovery Group. So one of the things that I think the SQA has been tasked with is to come up with proposals for how the exam diet is managed in 2021. I know that one of the options is that the exam diet might be later in the year. And I also know that they are looking at different requirements in terms of the balance between coursework and any final exam. But that's something that is being worked through at the moment. I think you're right that there will need to be clarity on that very soon after the schools return. As I alluded to right at the start of this meeting, in my view, it simply won't be the case that in secondary schools children are tasked with immediately moving back to making progress in learning and knowledge acquisition for whatever subjects it is that they're studying. There will need to be a period where there's quite a lot of time put into the health and well-being aspects, the re-socialising aspects, essentially time spent with young people to explore what has been their experience, what have been the challenges for them, what are the things that they are now anxious and concerned about. But one of the things that will be really important for young people is that those that have the, if you like, the normal rite of passage, which is that you do exams when you're in fourth year and you do exams when you're in fifth year, if that's going to be different, then we need to be able to tell them with some clarity two things. One is that it's going to be the same for everybody, and two, this is the clarity that you need about, you know, what are exams going to look like, what is the ongoing assessment of coursework going to look like, and being as clear as possible with young people what the expectations of them will be. And I think for those that are going into fifth year, maybe with long-held ambitions of going to a particular university or for following a particular career path, then again, and this isn't just Falkert's job, what the system needs to be able to do for these young people is set out a clear pathway for what is it that will be required of them. They need to know if the exams are going to be later. They need to know if universities are going to start at the same time, the same model, and so on and so forth. So I think my reflection on all of this would be that we are making a big step forward in August, but there are a lot of big steps still to be taken through the course of the remainder of 2020 and 2021. And I think, as has been said in other forums, I don't think we will go back to something that has been. I think we will go back to something that perhaps becomes significantly changed moving forward. A reflection would be that the step change that there's been with digital learning, use of video conferencing, you know, remote learning, and people coming together and perhaps lectures of 200-300 people. All of that has been good. It's been successful. It's taken things forward, and I think universities are now moving even further away from the idea of face-to-face tutorials and group lectures and so on. So all of these things will change. But the other thing that I think the digital learning agenda will mean is that assessment in future will be rethought. So the tradition of having a school assembly hall with 300 children sitting down to do their higher maths at a particular time on a particular day, I think moving forward, that might just not be the case any longer.
I think you're probably right, Robert, and that's probably something that will be for a future report that will come to members perhaps a bit later in the year, because we don't have the clarity around that. Is there any more questions related to the report, Pat?
Yes, the curriculum, will it change in any way because of the need for to be safer?
I think that's part of that future discussion as well, that the curriculum
Going back in 4
what
weeks.
can be delivered to what the exams are going to be. So I think there's going to be an element of having to look at developing that. Robert, can you briefly come back on that one?
I'm quite happy to wait for a later report, convener, if that helps.
Robert, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, the curriculum in the first couple of weeks will be focused on health and well-being primarily. We'll be telling children what's a virus, how do you protect yourself, how do you need to behave, why is it important to wash your hands, why is it important to stay apart. So all of the things that the children have been through, there'll be formalisation of some of that learning for them. There'll also be a key focus on relationships and general health and well-being. That's not to say that there won't be literacy and numeracy activities and more core activities, but there'll be a focus on those aspects to a much greater than before for a period, and then a move back into the more formal standard curricular offer.
Okay, thank you, convener. I realise these things are for a future report. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Alexander, you're on mute.
I hear too many people complain about that. The lighting's not very good in this particular computer, so I couldn't determine whether or not Alan Nimmo was blushing or not. He was making his contribution. I remember where the negativity came with regards to the extension of the preschool education. It came from Alan primarily as a Labour group spokesperson for education at that time. But we got over that, and we won people round, and that was a good thing, because this is an excellent programme. And when we think, you know, we're heaping praise on the director here, we're heaping praise on the staff, and quite rightly so. You can imagine the trying to pursue that similar role at a higher level. And we have a power surge. The lights are going fading and coming back again. But we have, I think, you know, not only an excellent report from our perspective in terms of elected members of Falkirk Council, we also have, I think, the beginning of a journey that is becoming very clear that will take education to a new level in this country. And the covert experience is perhaps a negative experience in the whole, but may actually turn out to be of benefit to education, because it's allowing us to focus on the improvement of the service, allowing us to deal with some of the issues that we've perhaps dodged. And I'm not speaking specifically about Falkirk. I'm talking about education in total, whether it be education officials, whether it be elected members, MSPs, MPs even. I think questions have been dodged with regards to education, and now been addressed, and that's something to be welcomed. We asked for flexibility in terms of the use of budgets, and we got flexibility in the use of budgets. It's difficult to accept that that positive line is negative somehow, and I'm not aware of anything being taken off the table in relation to education in this country. So You know, there's been consultation. The consultation has been primarily with COSLA, but that used to be the favoured option of the Labour group. I'm not sure why it isn't now, but the COSLA, to say the least of I think have done an excellent job in terms of liaison between the government and local government, and ensuring that it's a fast-moving agenda we've been involved in. It's a fast-moving agenda of the virus, and the implications for our children and their parents as a consequence of the virus. So it's something that I think that we can take a measure of satisfaction with in relation to how we've achieved locally and how we've performed locally. And if that means that you know, acknowledging that there's been anything other than decisive action taken by the authority, by the government, then I think that person's on the wrong track completely, because we can only praise the government for the attitude that they've adopted and for the measure of consultation they've given to COSLA in particular. So with that, Convener, happy to support the recommendations that are coming from within this report. Would associate myself with the positive comments that we made with regards to staff, and ask Mr. Miller to take back all our congratulations and thanks to the staff that have performed so admirably to date, and I'm sure we will continue to do so. Back on.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Alexander. I think everybody's now had the opportunity to speak and at length and ask questions. I think I really want to bring this to a conclusion. Councillor Bissett, I really don't want to open up the debate again. I think there's no amendment coming forward, so I think everybody's had a good go at what they've had to say. So I really think that it's now time to come to a conclusion. Everybody's in support of the recommendations. I think we have got a positive outcome and a plan forward for getting our children back to school, and we still have a fallback contingency should there be a further spike in COVID, and we have in a far better position to deal with that. I think what we have to say is going into lockdown was much easier than coming out. The challenges are absolutely amazingly difficult. We aren't going to get it 100% right first time, but that everybody is doing their absolute best. We have had a cautious approach from the government, and that has been proved time and time over the last few months to be the right way forward. And that cautious approach has enabled us to look at getting the kids back 100% to school by the end of August. Obviously, you can't replace the period of time just within that couple of weeks early start without over that the education that they've missed. Therefore, that will take time to flow through, and there will have to be adjustments within the curriculum to be able to do that, and that will be the next phase. There has been very close collaboration between government and COSLA. A lot of the guidance that has been done has been developed together. So I think collectively as a council we need to continue to support our service, our children's services, and getting the children back to school as quickly as possible. So on that, everybody's minded to accept the recommendations. Are we content to accept? Agreed. Okay, can I thank everybody for this continued meeting? I now hope that everybody can get some time to spend with family and friends as the flexibility around the lockdown is brought in, and hopefully summer may come back and we'll be able to enjoy our staycation in Scotland, and if people can manage to get a few days away into a different outlook, then so much the better. But thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Well,
Thanks,
thanks to the
convener.
chair.
Thank you.